Hey guys, I wanted to record a video for you all just to kind of give you an example, and hopefully this will also function as more explanation for our paper. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit about the structure and the steps of writing an analysis of identifying an ideal, and then also a comparison. So let's take a look at the first couple of slides, which will be kind of more like theory, and then we'll look at an example at the end. So for our purposes specifically, for the paper that we're writing, this paper has to do two things. It has to identify, through analysis of a text, an early American ideal held by the author of the text, or an ideal that the author, like held by the people that the author is writing about. So when you're thinking about the ideal, you can think about this in a number of ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be that kind of like philosophical, existential concept. Just something where you would be confident that the author would say, yes, everyone should do this. Everyone should believe this. If everyone did this, life would be better. Like if you think the author would say that, and you can confidently say that, then I think that that can qualify as an ideal for our purposes. And I do think that that's attached to the concept of actual philosophical idealism, but that's really heavy in it. It kind of goes over our heads a little bit, I think. So that's one of the things you have to do in this paper, but it's not just about what is the author or the people's ideals. You also want to make sure that you compare that ideal to where we are now. Where do we see this ideal still accepted or rejected today? And you don't have to focus on both unless you want to. So if you're like, well, I see it accepted here, but I also see it rejected over here, then you can just pick one or the other. If you want to focus on both, you can. I just don't want you all to have to do all of that work. But if you're like, I think my paper would be better if I talked about where it is both accepted and rejected, then of course you can do that, and you would just kind of actually have a third section of your paper where section 1 was, here's the ideal. Section 2, here's how it's accepted. Section 3, here's how it's rejected. Or you might kind of stagger them, going back and forth between here's the ideal, here's where it's accepted, or here's how part of this ideal is accepted, here's the other part of this ideal, and here's how it's rejected, and where it's rejected in contemporary society. Okay, so your steps to writing an analysis, and I've got two of these types of slides. I've got steps to writing an analysis, and I've got steps to writing a comparison. So the first thing that you want to do, like when you're ready to start writing, ready to keep writing, identify the part of the text that you want to focus on. I think that sometimes when we write about literature, we think like, oh, we have to take in the whole entire text. You want to think about the text in context. You don't have to focus on the whole thing all at once. In fact, papers that take it just chunk by chunk are better papers than when you try to like lump the whole text into a summary and then analyze that. So identify the part of the text that you want to focus on, and then step 2, decide what you're going to highlight about that text, or really, what are you going to analyze? What are you going to say about what you want to focus on? And that's the analysis part. That's the part that's missing the most, actually, in a lot of paragraphs. I usually see the textual evidence, and I see the interpretation, or kind of like the end stopping point, but sometimes I don't see the path between step 1, finding the evidence, and step 3, interpreting it. Sometimes I miss that path. Like, walk me through your thinking always. Okay, so then you just want to work on your paragraph. And so all paragraphs kind of take on the same structure. Specifically though, start with a topic sentence. What is the main claim, main focal point? The topic sentence should be in your own words. No quotes in the topic sentence. Then provide some context. So like sometimes you have to explain what's going on in the text right before your quote, or maybe some other kind of contextual information, background information, so that your reader can understand the place of the quote in the text and like what it's doing or how it's functioning. But you don't need a lengthy summary here. A sentence or two is fine. Then provide your textual evidence. That's usually in the form of a quote. It doesn't always have to be. A paraphrase is sometimes acceptable as well. Then provide your analysis. So this is, again, the part that most students skip over. I want you to analyze the textual evidence. So look at the language. Talk specifically about that quote. If the couple of sentences that follow textual evidence or a quote doesn't specifically talk about that quote, then you've missed something. You want to talk about that quote in your analysis. You can do one of two things after this. You can either go back and provide more textual evidence and analysis and kind of cycle through C and D here on this list until you get the point made that you want to make. Or if you're like a really lengthy, like your context is lengthy, your textual evidence is lengthy, your analysis is lengthy, it's fine to just have one, assuming that you have completely and fully developed that thought. A lot of the times we need to provide multiple examples in our writing about a text in order to solidify that we are correct, or at least that our claims have merit and value. Finally, get to that interpretation. This interpretation can function as the concluding sentence, like what's the main idea? A lot of the times the topic sentence is the interpretation and you're proving how you got there, and you just want to kind of remind your reader, by the way, y'all, this is where I was headed, here it is, bam, done. This is the ideal. Here's the evidence, here's how I get there, here's the ideal. The ideal, again, main point, main idea, can be your concluding sentence and your interpretation. Okay, again, remember, you're not just analyzing the text, you're also comparing what you're seeing as the ideal in the text to what you see today. So when you're writing this comparison in the context of our paper, first identify what part of life today you want to compare the text to and decide what you're going to focus on. Again, I'm going to give you guys an example in just a few more minutes. And then you're kind of, again, taking the same process. You write a topic sentence, that's the main idea of your paragraph. Give some context. If you don't know if your reader is going to understand the narrow focus that you're looking at, then maybe you need to explain it a little bit. Sometimes you might have to provide a definition, or you might have to explain a company or a political structure or something like that so that your reader understands, and that's perfectly fine. Then you give your evidence, quote, your research. You just also want to make sure that you cite it on your works cited page. But really what I definitely want is just a detailed explanation. Don't glaze over surface level, go into detail, give specifics, give examples if you can. And that's, again, like you've identified the part of life that you want to talk about. How does the ideal connect? Show me, give me specifics, explain it. There's a lot of logical reasoning and examples involved in the detailed evidence for this part of the paper. Then make the comparison. So is the ideal upheld? Or is it rejected? And just kind of like work through your explanation. Write a concluding sentence, which you can't see on my screen, but write a concluding sentence to just make sure that you've wrapped up that paragraph. Okay, so again, you've got some possible structures. When you write a compare and contrast essay, you can usually either tackle it like one chunk at a time, where if you're comparing two things, you've got like thing A at the first half of your paper and thing B at the second half of your paper. Or you can do like a flip-flop structure, which you can see here on the right-hand side of your screen, where you talk about thing A in its narrow function, and then you talk about thing B in the narrow function that relates to thing A, if that makes any sense. So like if we're looking on the right hand side of the screen, you see this flip-flop. You would first analyze the ideal, give some textual evidence, then you would talk about whether it's visible or rejected today, but specific to like one part of the ideal or one part of life today. Then you would do that again, but with like a different part of the ideal or a different part of life today. I probably would not take the structure on the right hand side of my screen. I would probably, if you just shift your eyes left, I would probably look at this structure, because for me, I would rather provide multiple paragraphs proving that this ideal exists and kind of breaking down the ways that the ideal is functioning in my text, or in my texts if I was looking at more than one. And then I would want to talk about if I see that being visible today. For me, that just feels like it's going to be less repetitive. However, you guys get to decide. I mean, whatever ends up being effective is what I recommend. So it's up to you. Okay, so I am just going to read you my 2 paragraphs, and I don't think I have them back to back. Now, this is just the part of the text that I'm focusing on. So like I said, don't take the whole entire text all at once in one paragraph, because then what else are you going to write about in your other body paragraphs? Let's imagine I have my thesis statement, and it's talking about my ideal, and I notice that ideal showing up in like 3 distinct places of the text. I want to take that one place at a time. So for the paragraph that I'm exemplifying here, I wanted to look at just this part of Benjamin Franklin's text, The Way to Wealth. So he starts, "If we are industrious, we shall never starve. For, as Poor Richard says, at the workman's house, hunger looks in but dares not enter. Nor will the bailiff or the constable enter, for industry pays debts, while despair increaseth them, says Poor Richard. What though, have you found no treasure, nor has any rich relation left you a legacy? Diligence is the mother of good luck, as Poor Richard says, and God gives all things to industry. Then plow deep, while sluggards sleep, and you shall have corn to sell and to keep, says Poor Dick. Work while it is called today, for you know not how much you may be hindered tomorrow, which makes Poor Richard says, 1 today is worth 2 tomorrows. And further, have you somewhat to do tomorrow, do it today. If you were a servant, would you not be ashamed that a good master should catch you idle? Are you then your own master? Be ashamed to catch yourself idle, as Poor Dick says. When there is so much to be done for yourself, your family, your country, and your gracious king, be up by the peep of day." Okay, so I'm focusing on this part of the text. And you'll notice that I even narrow that down in my example. But for right now, that's kind of where I thought, okay, I see an ideal here. I see Franklin trying to tell me something. So what do I want to say about this? I want to say that the ideal is that if you work hard today, even if you have no wealth, you will be able to make a living and be prosperous. That is what I think Benjamin Franklin's ideal is. Hard work. Hard work leads you places. Hard work gets you the things that you need. And then this is the paragraph that I wrote. Okay, and so I'm following that structure. Topic sentence, context, textual evidence, analysis. I do another piece of textual evidence, a little bit more analysis, and then I conclude with my final interpretation, which functions as my concluding sentence, which recaps my main idea. Okay, Franklin supports the ideal that hard work can take an American from rags to riches. In The Way to Wealth, Franklin provides a few key points that can ensure any American has wealth for themselves and their families. One of those points is industriousness, or hard work. He writes, "What though you have found no treasure, nor has any rich relation left you a legacy? Diligence is the mother of good luck." So I'm going to pause right here, because remember what I said. In your analysis, you want to make sure that you point to that text, specifically what you quoted, and that's what I try to do in the coming up sentences. Okay, resuming. Here, Benjamin Franklin explains that even in a situation where an American has not been born into a wealthy family, I've got a little typo here, or discovered something valuable, that does not mean they will be poor forever. Diligence, he explains, is how someone gets lucky, and in this case, lucky refers to gaining wealth. By diligence, Franklin means waking early and working every day, even once wealth has been acquired. He further considers, perhaps you are weak-handed, but stick to it steadily and you will see great effects. In this case, Franklin understands his readers' hesitations. What if they have something that makes them work slow or more difficult? Franklin does not give in. He tells his reader to keep working. Here, Franklin holds the ideal that it does not matter what someone's background is or who they are. If they work hard enough, they will be prosperous. Okay, so this is like my sample paragraph, and I'm saying here's the ideal, here's where I'm finding proof for it, and here's me trying to like work that out and explain it to whoever is reading my essay. Okay, but you aren't finished here, right? You still have the other part, which is the comparison. So first what you want to do is make sure that you know what part of today or contemporary life or whatever you want to think about it that you're going to compare your text to, and then kind of like specifically what are you going to focus on. And I think really what that means is like what kinds of examples are you going to use. So for me, I was thinking that Benjamin Franklin's ideal of working hard equals prosperity and wealth really reminded me of the American dream, which I feel like is a theme that we see like throughout literature, but even specifically things that we're seeing still. People, I think, still have the ideal that hard work equals wealth and being able to prosper. And so to me, I was thinking about kind of like how a lot of people talk about their side hustles. And so, you know, just kind of like you have a main job with your main income, but some people might have a second job, a job on the side where they just want to make extra money. And so I wrote a paragraph to compare Franklin's original ideal with what I feel like is still present today. And my two paragraphs are approximately the same length, and I try to use a couple of different examples in here. Franklin's ideal of hard work as a way to wealth is still an upheld ideal in contemporary America. The theme of the American dream, the idea that America has so much opportunity that anyone can come from nothing and make it into something, has certainly been questioned, but still exists as an ideal in many Americans' minds today. Both those who have made it, or were born into it, and those who have not yet reached their ideal wealth status. Specifically, we see much conversation from 2010 until now about something called the side hustle. What an American can do on the side of their full-time job in order to bring in some extra income and achieve the wealth status they're looking for. We see this in multi-level marketing businesses like Mary Kay, Young Living, and LuLaRoe, as well as in rideshare, Uber, Lyft, and food delivery services, Grubhub, DoorDash. Many of the individuals work on a part-time or micro-part-time basis in order to make some extra cash. This is a continuing example of Franklin's ideal: never stop working and you'll finally be wealthy. Okay, and so I would probably go on, and I might even consider breaking this up into a number of different paragraphs. That's pretty much everything that I wanted to say here. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to send me an email.